been out, raking in accounts of the macabre, wheedling these events from the guarded local communities across the fruited plain. It's trying. Now dine on this fresh crop of salacious seedlings. His name, Johnny Longbull, 19, a young man with a monkey on his back, and a force of nature beyond his comprehension on top of that. He had committed a high crime of his people's, and was to endure a tempest unlike any seen before. Location, South Central, South Dakota, USA. Date, May 2020. The last thing Johnny Longbull of the occulted Eke tribe believed was the belief systems of his people. During early May 2020, he found his own belief system being challenged as he drove fast from a tremendous upheaval in the firmament about Wyoming and the Dakotas. His people, hidden from the mind and media of the world as they began anew, were an underground Indian movement to rise the natives from their ashes and into prominence once more. They were a coalescence of several members of each of the 6 nation tribes. All were sent off together with their families to begin a new route, a new tribe that would form the 7th and strongest generation of Indians ever witnessed. Much of their culture, their worldly duties, came from the resurrection of long-abandoned Indian religious lore. While that sounds all fair and good to most, the self-reserved group was more akin to a cult. And Johnny grew up on the wrong side of the cult. He felt confined, bullied, abused, and turned to quick and easy drugs for his escape. First was a bit of weed and liquor, but as his teenage torments and tribulations tumefied, he found the modern miracle drug of the plains, methamphetamines. And from there, he became hooked and fell victim to abuses of another sort, and abuses of outsiders selling him that crystallized concoction of cerebrally crippling contraband. All that was history to the Indian lad now. At that moment, he had been driving as fast as possible for several hours, and had traversed part of Wyoming and half of South Dakota to escape a storm above that seemed to trail him and was intent on meeting him. Now, most storms aren't more than a bit of hot air and cold air making a lot of noise and atmospheric nonsense. Some get a little churlish and send down hail, and others get downright antagonistic and pelt the ground with large chunks of ice, or twisters that destroy structures and kill people and livestock. This storm following Johnny was, on a scale of 1 to 10, a pure predicament of pants-pooping panic. It couldn't even be charted in 1 to 10, and Johnny knew it. He had seen the thing coming from overhead in Saddle String, Wyoming, as he talked to one of his connections. It seemed innocuous enough, until the wind began screaming through the trees. Fist-sized hunks of ice were denting his pickup's roof, and a twister poked from the heavens to touch the ground a mile out. So the boy moved, and the storm moved as well, with the boy. He felt it was just a coincidence that the storm was chasing him, so he turned north and south, and then looped around it. And all the time it was coming for him. The National Weather Service was confused, then amazed, by the path of this storm as it did unnatural maneuvers to confound their scientific principles. The storm was in its 4th hour when it became an all-consuming topic on CNN. People about the nation, fascinated with the unusual weather patterns, began to pay attention and track the storm online. It was an almost constant tornado by that point, a seemingly ceaseless tornado. Once he had enough lead time, Johnny pulled into the truck stop outside of Murdo, South Dakota. He was keeping an eye on the storm approaching. It was growing darker all around him. The land spout widened and was dead set on rolling over him within a few minutes. People panicked and wrapped up their belongings and buildings to weather the tempest sure to arrive. Wind was whipping through everything above ground, and in the whining and whistling of the wind, Johnny believed he heard a voice talking to him, screaming out in rage, "Johnny, give me my eye! Give me what is mine!" He reasoned it out as a kind of detoxing. He was suffering from withdrawal, Johnny deduced. Luckily for everyone, Johnny finished his fill and took off at high speed down Route 83, due south for Rosebud Reservation and Nebraska. Right on his trail was the intense twister and all the trouble it had in tow. A sigh of relief emerged from the collective inhabitants of Murdo. This chase kept up for another couple hours. Johnny was unsure of how much carnage was in his wake, but he didn't care. He wanted some relief. He desired a fix, but it was too far out to find anything before he would be trapped in the hellacious storm. His mind was his only escape during the long drive south. The Indian recollected how his furtive tribe would make a titanic and dogmatic celebration of fertility every year. One of the subsets of these myriad processions was a mindless affair, with a recognition of favor from the rain god, the Wei Atsepec, whom would drink up the skies until full and only release at the directive of the chief elder. "Utter hogwash and cartswallop," the teen concluded. These rituals were nothing more than an anchor to their failed Indian legacy. It was primitive and childish superstition, long forgotten and rediscovered to become a palliative for their broken peoples. It was the opiate of the disenfranchised and disheartened. He was being passed by dozens of cops, absolutely intent on outrunning the storm themselves and uninterested in other speeders in their midst. Ordinary vehicles had long left the roads and taken refuge elsewhere. Now, though, the funnel was bearing down on Johnny and gaining. It would be maybe 10 minutes, and he would be consumed and destroyed by the black cone drilling into earth, plowing a furrow of the gods. Somewhere south of Thatcher, Nebraska, Johnny decided to make a stand and hope the storm would pass over his hiding spot. Down a back road, he found a ghost town and ducked in. There were only 3 or 4 dilapidated residences with weather-beaten and gray wood siding, constructed in an earlier century when times were very different. Everything was overgrown with bushes, weeds, and saplings. But there was enough space to enter one of the larger homes and search for a storm cellar. And lo, there was! A Tornado Alley was a predictable place. It provided the young man with a possible safe space. That erstwhile home's basement was made of huge rock and mortar, creating a deep and resilient bunker to weather any tornado. Out of the small window on one wall, Johnny saw the overgrowth bend over, and rip out of the ground. Beyond, he witnessed his truck skid around and then roll end over end into the distance as the cone was on him. Wind was ripping the house open, bending back old lap siding, and whistling like maniacally monstrous vocal cords in the throat of a behemoth. The gusts waned and puffed in unusual format. It was a technique of wind and wood, which provided a voice
Give me back what is mine.
The voice wheezed and creaked from mixing dried wood and paroxysms of air. Johnny cowered under the thick timber stairs, nestling into a stone outcropping meant to contain items in a corner of that basement.
You'll never escape my wrath for making me blind.
The weird voice spake. Shut up, Johnny finally barked. You're not real.
My eye!
It blasted.
Give me my eye!
And then the entire house was shredded above Johnny, drifting up and outward as the funnel pinpointed the disused and undermaintained hovel, which in its day was a mighty and magnificent construct for a family of 8, and the apple of that community's eye. In a twinkling and a teardrop it vanished. The basement, though, remained, Johnny deep inside and laying flat on the earthen floor. For 20 minutes, the center of the storm, with laser precision, pummeled and scraped at the earth as it swirled about to try and extricate the Indian from his hiding place. The wind was recorded at over 300 miles per hour for the duration of this final effort. Everything was cleaned out of the area. Trees, saplings, human detritus of all ages, the grass, the dirt, the animals, all was thrown up and over into the distance outside of the tempestuous zone. Even a few of the looser and lighter stone blocks on the upper edge of the cellar were carved out of their centuries' holdings and spun off into another place. And then it swirled out of existence. The ungodly and penetrating winds died off, and the sky cleared from dark black to light gray. Had Johnny won a battle against the forces of nature? He pondered what had transpired to dissipate the destructive disturbance. When he was able to peek over his boundaries of stone planted deep in the earth, Johnny saw the land around him. It was barren. Dark, rich soil was left, churned up and flat, and featureless landscape for what seemed infinity. Nothing left but fresh soil. And rimming the raised span was a spiraling wall of wind and dust going up into a gray socket of sky where there was nothing. No clouds or stars or sky or anything, just a weaving of far-off lightning and thunder connecting the perimeter of the storm's embankments. Johnny realized he was trapped in a play of perdition he never believed would assign his role so steadfastly. Pulling from his pocket a large glassy bauble, a stone of some sort, with hundreds of facets, Johnny realized the tribal elders weren't following dogma for the sake of frivolity and community. He had witnessed the chief elder of the Eki Shoshone only a day earlier. After a group prayer and mantra was raised, the man went into his teepee, constructed for the purposes of the fertility events. The consumed man emerged with the precious-looking stone and held it high. The entire tribe sighed and screamed and yelped in peals of joy. This was the eye of the Wai Atsepek, the bad storm god, dropped from the heavens by the grace of Coco Pele. Wai Atsepek would suck the moisture from the air, the lakes, streams, and forests during fall and winter to grow bloated on his stolen booty. A greedy god indeed, and always ensnared by his failing, because his body was so engorged that his eyes would fall out, to be snatched by the mischievous and beneficent hands of Coco Pele, and given to the observant and pious peoples below, whom yearned for relief from the storm god's unforgiving lust for water. This stone, this amazing gem Johnny was holding, would be taken back by the Wai Atsepek and forced back into the god's eye socket. And where it was recovered, a gush of rain would soak and fertilize the fields, as the stone, the eye, squeezed waters back from the god to be regained by the earth. Johnny had followed his elder into the field, where he planted the gem in a shallow grave of loose dirt, alone, without others to see the wisdom of the elder's placement. Yet Johnny had, and he stole the eye when the elder left, only to be hounded by the jealous and needy god from then onward. He schemed to sell the artifact to someone, anyone buying, for a nice price that would feed his need for meth. In the boy's greed, he had now diverted the refreshing rains from his reservation. He was jonesing for a pharmaceutical fix, and still struggling to throw off his materialistic and pre-programmed belief of a universe ruled purely on the mechanical interactions of lifeless materials, giving the semblance of autonomy. Johnny had to concede that he was merely a self-idolizing fool traipsing across tripwires of the terrible and transcendental.
Give it to me!
Screamed winds far away at the lad, the walls of the storm closing in at tremendous speed. "Take it!" angrily shouted the child of a man, throwing the gleaming and glinting stone as far afield as possible out of the sturdy subterranean structure he cowered in like the rat he was. Way at the peck storm, the eye of the storm closed into a narrow funnel and hoisted high into the atmosphere the shining and beaming gemstone, and the funnel recessed into the heavens, placing that precious piece of the god's anatomy back into its rightful setting. Thunder and lightning dashed about and reverberated in anger and pain as the storm god righted himself, but gave up his ill-gotten trophy of H2O. Clouds bubbled from the striations of the tornado, and the entire panoply of heaven was end-to-end in luscious cumulonimbus. Seconds later, rain began, warm rain gushing an instant torrent of unbelievable magnitude. The sight was impossible. Johnny was forced into the cellar, against a wall, to avoid the painful pelting of aqua pura. The sound was deafening, and the water kept coming, sloshing about in that cellar, turning it into a swimming pool, pushing Johnny up to the surface slowly. Climbing out of the stone encasement, he was kneeling hunched over in 6 inches of water. The earth was slime and mud now, and there was seemingly no cessation. And then there was, in an instant. Nothing was left but endless mud swimming in inches of water, and a sturdy swimming hole made of an old storm cellar. Blue sky, and nothing else. The world was wiped clean and baptized in a gush of unearthly outpouring. The sun grew harsh. Johnny knew he could never return to his reservation. He vowed to stay in this sanitized landscape and make it his new home, where he could form it as he wished and make the old foundation that stood the wrath of a heathen god his new dwelling. It would be hard work, but this place was where his folly and fear of the unknown clashed against something amazing. And he survived. That was his sign to begin again, and make right what was once asunder in his life.
Like and subscribe before I die, and ring the little bell or you will surely go to hell.
Oh, we're telling spooky stories. This is not a spooky story. Oh, there's no way on the top I can say.
Depends how you look at it. It is kind of spooky.
I guess so.
Wait, that's it? That's the end of the story?
That is a